I'm just going to tell everybody about home labs, why they're cool, why you should have one, and then we'll go through some steps. It's going to be slightly technical, but I'm pretty sure everybody in this crowd will be able to follow. Shouldn't be too big of a deal.
Hi guys, hello again, welcome back to Bridges and Tech's Happy Hours. For those of you who are new, we meet every Wednesday from 6 p.m. to 7:30/8 p.m. We go out overtime often, so feel free to jump off whenever you feel the need to. And with that, I'll get started. As you guys already know, Bridges and Tech is a tech community for women of color. So we provide women of color with the resources and community to help them excel in their tech careers, but we're joined every week by our allies, so people of different genders, races, and backgrounds. So feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat and connect with each other in LinkedIn. So drop your name, maybe your title, or a job that you're looking for, or any questions you might have in the chat. Bridges and Tech has 3 people on our board right now. We have Joanna. She is our president, and this is a little bit about Joanna. My name is Imara McClure. I am your vice president. And then lastly, but not least, we have Gina King, and she is our director of programs. For what we're going to have every Wednesday for the next few weeks. I'll let you guys know during the meeting. I don't have it open at the moment, but also let us know what topic or speakers you guys would like to see in the upcoming weeks. I think we have March all planned out, but we're still taking topics and speakers for the next few months. And with that, our presentation today is how to get your feet wet with home labs with Ben Stitt.
All right. So first things first, to get your feet wet, you need a bowl of water. Yeah, hi, I'm Ben. I work in mostly the Microsoft cloud space, but I've been all over, from help desks to electronics in the military to systems engineering for servers and networking and security, and you name it, I've been there in a short amount of time. So tonight, I'm just going to tell everybody about home labs, why they're cool, why you should have one, and then we'll go through some steps. It's going to be slightly technical, but I'm pretty sure everybody in this crowd will be able to follow. Shouldn't be too big of a deal. Home labs, how to get your feet wet. Gina helped me with this. I'm Ben. I'm a hacker, a tinkerer, and a dungeon master. I just like wandering about doing things like Kane and Kung Fu. Kind of my background really quick, like I said, I've been around for a little while. I have a bachelor's degree in philosophy. I'm a submarine veteran of the submarine force in the U.S. Navy, where I was a sonar technician. I'm currently an active member of the Internet Society, part of their cybersecurity working group. I'm a proud member of Bridges and Tech, if no one knew that, and the West Michigan Cybersecurity Consortium, where I apparently am now on a board of something. So that would be it for me. All right, so we'll kind of move right into home lab. Feel free to unmute if you have any questions, just kind of blurt them out. I don't know. I guess you can, whoops, didn't quit out all my stuff. But didn't quit out of everything because I have lots to show you. All right, we'll see if we could keep the chat up too. There we go. Okay, so like I said, home lab, getting your feet wet. Found a fancy little lab background. So reasons for a home lab, the questions as to why you would need a home lab. First and probably foremost for almost everybody is going to be learning. Like if you work in IT, you need a home lab. You need one. Now, it doesn't have to be crazy. It doesn't have to be like your own data center, but I think having one is totally mandatory. Like you're going to learn so much by spinning up new virtual machines. You're going to, add networking, and then you're just going to tinker about with it. So on top of that, there's testing, and whether it's your application developer and you test that way, whether you're going to spin up your own like Apache web servers and test out what you're doing, or you want to deploy something new, possibly even in your work production environment. I do lots of contracts and work with a lot of smaller businesses. So my home lab is also my test environment, because a lot of those small businesses don't have their own test environments, and they don't necessarily appreciate me spinning up things in their environment without them being tested. The third one, which is possibly not talked about a whole lot, is taking control of your data and of the applications you use. So anything you currently use in the cloud, I'm going to guess there's like an open source thing that you can self-host. There's a whole community now of people that do self-hosting. There's Nextcloud, which is like a collaboration, G Suite kind of Office 365 SharePoint sort of thing, where you can internally have all of your files for collaborating. It comes with an instant messenger and like video and stuff, and it's all owned and run by you instead of whoever, Google or Microsoft or whoever. Same thing with like password managers. Those are really big these days. But also they're becoming using cloud-based or third-party based non-open source are becoming a big deal, because I just saw that LastPass is changing how they're doing everything. Now everybody's kind of all up in arms, and in April, everything in LastPass is going to change. You're not going to be able to do this or that. So you could just use something that you host on your own. And some of the stuff you can remotely access, like Nextcloud, Bitwarden, which is a open source password manager. You can cloud host it, or you can host it yourself, and you can still access it from anywhere. The app, you can get an app on your phone still. Apps on your phone will talk to your house. Like, it's crazy. It's a crazy world. It's pretty cool. So kind of that's the big like, hey, this is why you should have a home lab. Now, as to like what's in a home lab, I think that's the part that's kind of really open to interpretation. It's I think a home lab can be your laptop or your desktop or whatever you have, and some sort of hypervisor. Like I'll show you here in a minute, like Oracle VM Virtualbox. Or it could be Windows subsystem for Linux, which is crazy. You can run this on, I'm just running Windows subsystem for Linux. It's its own kernel inside of Windows 10, where you could run pretty much any distribution you can think of. And we'll get to distributions and that kind of stuff. That we'll sort of touch base on everything. We're not really going to go too deep into everything, but we'll touch base on a little of everything. So I think the biggest thing for what makes a home lab is like the whatever you have around. Like, do you have an old laptop? Old laptops work great for servers, especially because they already have like monitor and keyboard built in, and you don't have to find a way to separately set up a monitor and keyboard. So you can just take an old laptop if you have one sitting around. You can spin up, Windows, Linux, put like a Virtualbox on there. And then if you want, you can just tuck it in a closet and run everything from there. We'll kind of go through how that works. So I think the big stuff you should have, like what you're going to do with whatever you got, is servers and networking. So like networking's pretty standard, I think that's another one of those, use what you got. Like I think especially at first with your networking, you're not going to really need to go crazy with it. But as you move on, you'll probably start to want to be like, oh, this firewall thing is pretty cool. I'm going to add one of those. And it's one of those things where like you're starting out small and you could choose to move or to not move. You know, you could go big, you could go not big, you could keep it all on a Raspberry Pi. If it were me and I were starting over again, instead of my airplane that I have running in the background, that's less airplane than it used to be. But like I have a big old server box that I built out of an old gaming PC that I had. Like I gutted it and I put server parts in there. If I went back, I'd just be running like 8 Raspberry Pis right now instead of that. Now I just have, I have a bunch of Raspberry Pis for other stuff, but I think I would just do everything with Raspberry Pis because one, I think that's cool. And two, they're low power and they aren't loud. I brought an actual like 1U rack server, big old rack servers like you see at an enterprise data center. I brought one of those home one time. I fired it up and from the basement up to the office upstairs, my girlfriend ran out and just said no. So, maybe not one of those. I wouldn't recommend unless you've got like your own super space where you can put things. And you'll see, I'll show you like in the resources, people do crazy stuff. You can have it. There are people that like their whole basement, you might as well just be renting out data center space at that point. People get really into the home lab stuff. Like it's good for learning, like I said, and for testing, but it's a hobby. Like it's a hobby for people and it's fun because there's a lot of cool stuff you could do. So like, well, just some quick project ideas, and then I'll show you spinning something up and I'll show you what you can do with projects. So like, I just kind of came together and I think you're going to hear from a lot more people about this stuff over the next couple weeks, couple months. Like, we're roping in other people to give presentations on what they do with their home lab. So you're going to get a lot of ideas. These are just kind of what I had, like the hosting your own stuff, which is Nextcloud. That's like your collaboration suite. Plex is a super big one. Plex is your own video server. I have one of those running. I have it running on a NAS of mine. And basically you're hosting your own Netflix. The movies that you have, you put it on this server and you can serve them out to your friends. You can watch them, wherever you are. Everything's great. You could do security stuff with it, like make a honeypot. I haven't done that yet. That's like one of my big ones that I want to do is make a honeypot. But I'm never so confident in the networking VLAN sort of aspect of once somebody's into my honeypot, how are they gonna, what else, where are they gonna move laterally? Same thing with you could do a pen testing lab. I've done that before. Those are easy and fun to spin up because you can just pull virtual machines off the internet that are set up vulnerable. So like, I'm going to download this virtual image of an old like Windows XP workstation or like a purposefully vulnerable WordPress website. And you get all the stuff and then you take you've got your server box and you put another virtual machine on it, like with Kali Linux or something like that for network testing and penetration testing. And you start playing around with it. You start, trying to poke holes in your own stuff to see how it works. I think, yeah, a home wiki. I think wikis are really cool. They're really easy to spin up. I spun one up that I run as a website that I should probably remember that I do that. But making your own wikis is super easy and you can put anything in it, like, I have one that I call the Hackernomicon that has like all my knowledge of what I do, like, all my notes that I take and everything go into this like Hackernomicon wiki that I update. But you could do, like these are my recipes, or this is, like your home wiki is your home project site. Same with GitLab. It's kind of similar, except that's more, like you can put your code base, and if you're working on projects, you can track everything. Like it's like GitHub. It's open source kind of GitHub. But you can do wikis and you can have all of your code. And like, if you want to get crazy into things like orchestration and, plenty of people do like Kubernetes orchestration and Ansible and whatever big words that mean something to other people. They just go nuts with that kind of stuff. And GitLab will help you like organize that stuff. WordPress, super simple. I think if I were to, like, a one big project that I would give to everybody is spin up your own WordPress site, because it's super easy and you learn quite a bit. Because WordPress requires a LAMP stack, which is Linux, Apache, MySQL, or MariaDB, whatever you want, and PHP. We're going to do that here in a minute. So it's really easy. Domain controller, also another good one. If you work pretty much anywhere, you're going to be exposed to domain controllers. It's a great way to build your own Active Directory. Like if you're in Windows, you could do LDAP and that kind of stuff on Linux too. But I'm talking strictly like a Windows domain controller. You can build your own Active Directory. You can build all the DNS out. You could do a separate DNS server. I love DNS servers. I love playing with those. I love having my own. It's cool to kind of watch what goes in and out of your DNS server. So domain controllers, like that's a big like learning project thing. And you can use that for testing too, because you're always going to need to fix something with a domain controller. I mean, if you work in the world of Windows, you're going to break that thing. And you should maybe know how to fix it, or at least know where to go to fix it. Same with file servers. Everywhere's going to have a file server. I recommend if you work in a place that runs Windows servers, like a small, medium business, they probably run their file servers on Windows Server, spin one up, see how it works. And then pretty dashboards. I think dashboards are great. Everybody should have dashboards everywhere. You should dashboard everything. Learn to use an API. I think I'm finding out, like when it comes to career progression, the more I know about APIs and the more I know about how to automate and script what I do, the more valuable I become. So, that can apply to everything, but I think dashboards are a fun way to do it. Like you're connecting, like, this is how much CPU I'm using, or these are how many people that are downloading, watching Fast and Furious movies on the server right now, and that kind of stuff. You could dashboard just about anything. Just about everything has an API connection these days. So that's more or less kind of the gist of it. I've got some resources. We're going to take a look really quick. I put some resources on my website, benstitt.com. You'll just see a big list of like links and stuff. But I think when it comes to resources, I think, you can never have like enough stuff. I have so much junk. Don't do that. Actually, don't. Jessica shouldn't. Hopefully, she can't hear that. I have lots of junk, but use what you have. That's the biggest thing for resources. But and I think don't, unless you really have to or really want to, don't pay for things. Software wise, like hardware, you might have to pay a few bucks for a hard drive or for a switch. But the big thing is like the places you can get those, you're gonna want to Craigslist, swaps, like hardware swaps online, Facebook Marketplace. You can pick up lots of stuff for practically nothing. A lot of places just want to give their old servers away. Yeah, like I just saw. Yeah, James has a 2U mounted to his floor joist. Oh man, that's great. Oh, that is no good, dude. I would never. I really would love to put mine in the basement and just kind of like have it all patched in. But yeah, someday. Yeah, Reddit.
Ben, that my floor joists are the exact same width as the server rack, so I kind of had to.
Oh, that's perfect. Oh man. Yep. So yeah, I mean, I think we'll just kind of go ahead and get into it and kind of like I'll give you, I have an idea of what software is typically pretty good to use, and I think you could don't take it as like gospel. I personally like Virtualbox, but I also think Hyper-V is okay. So we'll get into that really quick. Okay, so right now I'm showing off Virtualbox. You can just download it from here. I'll put it in here. Virtualbox.org. If I can spell. Okay, so it's a Type 2 hypervisor. Really quick trip into the world of hypervisors. You have Type 1 and Type 2 hypervisor. Hypervisor is where all your virtual machines go. So, when you see VMware and that kind of stuff, that's all hypervisor. So a Type 1 hypervisor is what's referred to as a bare metal hypervisor. So if I just take my server box that I have back here and I load it with VMware ESX, which is their enterprise grade hypervisor, and they have a free version. If you want to build your own server, I would use that. I don't use it right now, but I would still recommend it. So take it or leave it. It's really cool. You're not going to get all of the power than if you paid for it. Like if you work in an enterprise and use VMware, you're not going to be able to do crazy stuff like migrating, like hot migrations and failovers and blah, blah, blah. But if you really need to start getting into that, you'll figure something else. Like by the time you're like, yeah, I really need to do high availability failovers in my home lab. When you get to that point, you're going to probably know something what you're going to use anyway. So, so that's a Type 1 hypervisor. It's on bare metal. Hypervisor is an operating system. It's a pretty low overhead operating system that sits as close as possible to the bare metal. So it's, you have your hardware and then you have the hypervisor. And what the hypervisor does is talks to all of your hardware. It talks to the hard drive, it talks to the CPU, talks to your network cards, and then it sort of works everything together so that you can load separate machines onto there. So on top of the hypervisor is where you load your operating systems. A Type 2 hypervisor, which is what we're looking at right now, is like VirtualBox, VMware Fusion. Those are the two big ones. VMware Workstation. Fusion is the one for Mac. Workstation is for Windows. They're both great. They both cost money, so forget them. I'm going to use this one because it's free. But a Type 2 hypervisor is sitting above your operating system layer. So it's still virtualizing everything, but not quite in the same way. With a Type 1 hypervisor, you're getting a lot more throughput and it's getting direct access to all your input output. With a Type 2, it's got to go through Windows or OS X or whatever, just kind of a little side rail. If that's confusing, it's only because of the way I explained it. So what we'll do here really quick is I'll show you what it's like to spin up one. So like, hey, I would like to make my new home lab. I don't know if you can see the screen sharing stuff. Get into the home lab. You want to learn something. I think downloading VirtualBox onto whatever you're using right now. If you have to do it on a work computer, if you've got a home computer, it works on Mac, it works on Windows, it works on Linux. It's pretty easy to install and use. So really what we're just going to do is we're going to go to ubuntu.com. And we're just going to spin up our new virtual machine. I recommend Ubuntu. You could do whatever the heck you want, as far as I'm concerned. I my 2 cents on what Linux distribution you should choose if you are wanting to play around with that is Ubuntu. Is it the most user-friendly and easiest to set up? No, but it's the most popular and it's well documented. So somebody's going to be able to help you if you get lost. So that being said, thanks, James. I gotta minimize the chat. So we're gonna do Ubuntu Server right now. So it's pretty easy. You just click download, and then I already did it, so you don't have to sit with me and watch YouTube videos while it downloads. But it's just gonna go to this here. You're gonna say, I want to download Ubuntu Server. LTS is long-term support. Pretty sure the S is support. Long-term service, long-term support, whatever. It's the one that works well. I would recommend that one. They make rolling releases. Most distributions do. They'll, like quarterly releases, nightly releases. It seems really cool, but it's going to be a headache sometime. So unless you really want to test it out with a like bleeding edge, get the long-term stuff. So we download that. All right, it goes into my downloads folder, yada, yada. I've got my Virtualbox installed. Easy enough. I hit add. And notice how like cute and easy this is. Like, I feel like anybody can figure this out. Except maybe my mom, but she's not here. We don't let her come to these things. Okay. So I have, what did I do with that? Obviously, we have to find it. Oh, because what's that? Oh, somebody said something. So I keep all of mine on my network storage, my NAS. And I hit the wrong button. That's why. That's why it's no worky. And okay. We'll do this. New. Ubuntu test 2. And then our machine folder. Typically, you can leave just about everything as default. It's smart enough to know what it's doing. The recommended, sure, why not? Depends on how much RAM you have. Also, tip, I would say, like, if you're going to build a server, have at least 16. If you have a desktop, have an 8 is nice. A laptop, 8 is nice. It's just a matter of what you can run. If you want to start playing around with like Windows 10 virtual machines or something like that, it's going to suck up more memory than a lot of this other stuff. But like an Ubuntu server, we could run it at like 256K, I bet, and it'd be fine. It's like you need barely anything to run this. So we need to create a hard disk for it. So what it does is it's creating, what a virtual machine does is it creates kind of this wrapper for the operating system itself and for the processes. So on top of your, your hardware and on this little hypervisor, this little oh man, you're gonna have to drink again. This little hypervisor kernel is all your IO wrapper for your particular virtual machines. And then separate from that is going to be the hard drive for it. So it's creating a virtual hard drive. And it's more or less, it's a file. Like it's making a file on a drive somewhere that says this belongs to this virtual machine. Easy enough. I'm going to leave the default because who cares? Dynamically allocated. A lot of people say you should do a fixed size. I don't care. If you work in a production environment and are in charge of this kind of stuff, or you do this stuff for a living, you probably know that you probably want it at fixed size, and dynamically is not the way to go. But you're not working in a production environment, and if you suck up all of the storage, it's not going to ruin somebody else's SQL database like I like to do in production. Sure, 10 gigabyte hard drive. we're going to say it's like 25, whatever. You know, it depends. We're not going to have a desktop or anything like that. So it's not going to take a lot of space or a lot of anything. And then easy enough. Go
Is
ahead.
VirtualBox thin provisioning that hard drive or fat provisioning it?
Thin provisioning.
Okay.
Yeah. That was the whole thing with like fixed versus dynamic. I feel like if you're doing this on your, you know, like your desktop or your laptop, I don't know, maybe somebody else will say like you should use best practices, but I like dynamic disks for my test environments because they just kind of do their own thing and I don't have to worry about it. In a production environment, like I said, like you really want to know what storage is going where. Because if you start using more storage than you have, you're going to have a really bad day. Like you're going to be on the phone with VMware support for 7 or 8 hours figuring out what's going on is how your day is going. So yeah, let's back up and let's just do fixed disk. Let's just not worry about dynamic. Let's do fixed disks. But ultimately, the defaults in any of this stuff is fine. Like, I think that's the big thing for starting out. Like, don't worry about any of this stuff. And you know what? You're going to break it all. That's it. I mean, there's none of this. It's going to work right in 2 days anyway. And then you're going to do it again and you're going to figure out what went wrong. Like, we're going to install this Ubuntu test server right now and it's going to come up and we're going to see what's happening. But like tomorrow, I'm going to spin up something else on it, like a dashboard server. And I'm going to do something wrong. And then I'm going to have to go back and figure out what I did wrong. And I'm going to just blow it away and throw it in the trash and start over too. All right. So we want a startup disk. Sure. Which is that hard drive that we set up. And it also automatically, so what it's doing is when you download the operating system image, it's called an image. It thinks, I mean, although nobody's like installed an operating system with a DVD in quite some time, that's still like the default. So basically we're tricking the fake computer, the virtual computer, into thinking that we put an Ubuntu disk in. Like, hey, we got this in the mail, you know, 50 free hours of Ubuntu, and we're putting the disk in there. Like, okay, can't do this, blah, blah, blah. Oh no, what did I just do? That's interesting. Oh, okay, we're good. All right. So we'll kind of give this a second. We're going to start out the installation, but we're not going to like hang out and watch this work because that's dumb. Nobody wants to do that. But this is what happens when you start installing a Linux kernel or a GNU Linux machine. Easy enough, right? Like up, down, enter. Okay. Yep. We're going to continue without updating. Yep. We use a keyboard and we're English. And this is, you know, like you could choose your, you know, like, hey, I prefer to use this or that. Proxy, who cares? If you know what this is, you'll know whether you have one or not. Mirror address. Sure, why not? You could, you know, use somebody else, but use an entire disk. We definitely want to do this because and this might throw you off a little bit. Sometimes, you know, I find I even have to think about it because it says use an entire disk. And I'm like, well, I don't want to not be able to use my Windows anymore. But that's actually, you'll notice below it where it says VBox hard disk 25.7576 gig. That is when it says use an entire disk, this machine doesn't know that it's a virtual machine. Kind of. Sure. It just sees this is the hard drive that's attached to me, and I'm going to use this hard drive. Do you want me to use the whole thing? Yeah, we do, because we gave you the whole thing. The rest of it, you can just leave unless you want to do custom storage. I don't know anything about storage. I am really bad with storage, so I just leave it all alone. So yeah, it gives you this status that I don't really pay attention to because I don't know a lot about it. I don't know what's going on, so I just hit done. Do I want to continue? Yeah, I do. Okay, so I'm Ben. My server is Bridges in Tech website. Username is Ben. Password is my really bad one. I always install an open SSH server. SSH is awesome. It's basically you're just getting a command line tool to be able to remote control into computers. I would turn it on even if you don't know what it is right now, even if you're going to use a desktop service. But then again, somebody else's opinion might be don't turn it on because it's not secure. Well, I'm sorry. It's not like if you aren't going to use something, don't turn it on, you know, so that could be another one. But I say turn it on because I'm going to use SSH. I'm not going to import an SSH identity, but you can. It's really fun. And then the cool part about this is like it's come so far with installers. Like, you know, it used to be you've got to compile it from source and yada yada and do a bunch of stuff that I don't understand. But now it just tells me, do you want to install this stuff right away? Oh, cool, Nextcloud. That's the thing that I wanted anyway. Like I wanted the server to do that. Okay, you know, you can install that. PowerShell, I guess. We'll do Wormhole because I read about that last night. You know, you just kind of, you hit space and then boom, it selects it. And we're done. So it's doing the install. It's kind of doing its thing. Okay, bye. We don't care about that guy for now. Because eventually it's going to look like this. Anybody have any like burning questions so far? I'm trying to be like as technical as I can without going overboard. It's easy for me not to be extremely technical because I usually don't know what the hell's going on anyway. So yeah, using the spacebar. I know it. I'm glad I mentioned that using the spacebar is required. Like that's how you select things, is using space. Okay. So eventually you end up with this like pretty generic sort of operating system. Cool. If you want to be cool like me, you can live your life at the command line. But if you want to be a noob like me, because your command line skills aren't great, you cannot do that because it's I love doing like I think I got a piece of advice one time about using the command line, and it's learn to do something once in the GUI, the graphical part. Like do something, figure it out there, and then go back and figure out how to do it at the command line. I thought that was great advice. It works really well for me. Like I'll either, you know, I mean, most of what I do is Googled anyway, you know, like when I need to, I mean, you can see like, what did I just do with that? Like, oh, okay, I want to install a wiki today. So I just like plugged in, oh, that's my Gmail. We don't need that. I don't know what I did with it, but I typically, oh, there it is. Hey, where'd it go? Yeah, okay. So this is what I just plug it in the search bar. You know, I go to DuckDuckGo because I wear a tinfoil hat and I don't use Google. So I go to DuckDuckGo and I say install wiki, and I'll even add home lab. Like if I'm doing it for a home lab, install media wiki, install wiki, whatever, home lab. And it'll usually take you right to the documentation. And most of the stuff, the documentation's so good, it'll just say like, copy this and paste it at the command line. So that's what I did. What? So this is our wiki. Hold on. So if you can kind of start out there, like, I think this is a good place to start. I think, taking what you currently have and playing around with it. And then if you really want to keep going, you could take a bunch of junk that you find around, or you could buy it, or, you could build it. I would love to just build my own small little server. I'm really into like smaller is better. I want to build like Raspberry Pi clusters for no other reason than it just seems like it's fun to do. Like I just want to take like 8 Raspberry Pi compute modules and shove them into something and have it all like high availability with failover and use it, like make its own high performance computing and yada yada. I also, now that I see that this guy's playing video games, I also want to, it's been a while since I've run a game server. You can do that too. So we can play Viking game. Yeah. You should definitely do that, Shanice. They are awesome. And pretty much anything, like any of those projects that I showed on a slide, all of those can be done on a Raspberry Pi. Like, there's almost nothing you can't, unless you want to do like a Windows domain controller. That's not going to work. But like, I've got a DNS server on one. I have a Raspberry Pi Zero right here. These are awesome. They're even smaller and goofier than the regular Raspberry Pis. Wait, what? What did James say was untrue? Oh, yes. Pi and high performance. Yes. High performance computing on your Raspberry Pi. What's untrue? I missed it.
Oh, you can totally run a domain controller on a Raspberry Pi.
A Windows domain controller?
Oh, you bet.
Oh, man. All right. Cool. Yes, please. Perfect.
I mean, I'm not going to suggest that you do it in production if you're an enterprise, but
man, I've seen some domain controllers in production that I wish were on a Raspberry Pi. There is like some really bad stuff. But that's cool. I'm gonna have to check that out because I need to build a new domain controller. I spun up a dev with Microsoft Dev. I spun up my own Office 365 suite, and I want to be able to figure out the hybrid stuff between local Active Directory and Azure Active Directory. So that's cool. I'm gonna have to. Wow, because I've only read that like the Windows 10 IoT or whatever works on there. So now I assume it's just you.
Yeah, give me a call on the hybrid. We're running it at KDL if you have questions.
Nice. Yeah, man, definitely. I do quite a bit with it, but I'm studying on the security side of it now for the MS 500 exam, for the security exam. Yeah. So, okay, you could do anything with a Raspberry Pi. Never mind. I thought you could do anything -1, but now you can just do anything. So they're awesome. I think probably for me, like when I started out, and I was like, oh, I need to be able to learn some of this stuff. And if you're, the stuff you see at work and you're like, man, I really would like to know more about this, or like, I work at, for me, it was like I work at the help desk and I don't know what the hell's going on. Like, what are these people doing? What's Active Directory and why are these people being jerks to me? Cool. And then you're like, oh, but it looks so big and complicated and confusing. Well, it's only really big and complicated because somebody's been playing with it for like 10 years and it's become big and complicated. Or you have 30,000 employees, or you have, like nobody takes care of it. Everything that you see in your production environment at work, you can probably replicate in your home lab. There's, all of the databases, the websites you use, pretty much everything is like, you can host it at home. Databases are a big one. I think, I think every home lab should have a wiki should have a WordPress, a domain controller. Those are big ones.
Hey, Ben, I actually want to interject because you brought yourself back to talking about Wiki versus GitLab or GitHub.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people using one or the other. Myself, I've been kind of like sitting on the fence about which way to go, because sometimes they seem really similar. But are they different enough to where you're all aboard having both?
I don't think so. I think like if you are doing it, you want to have a code repository and you want to have a place for like your knowledge documentation, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely the case for me.
GitLab, man. I don't think you need both. I think if you only want to do like knowledge, do a wiki. But I know that GitLab has its own wikis, and it's like GitHub where you can attach your wikis to repositories, you can attach repositories to wikis, you could, and then you can do a bunch of other silly project management stuff too, like Kanban cards and, all of your polls and everything. So I think I'll probably, now that I'm saying, I'm just going to go spin up a GitLab. Like I don't have a GitLab or a wiki right now. I had GitLab running for a while, but I mostly use GitHub. But I think I might spin up a local GitLab. Yeah, my pleasure, man. So I think like if you're kind of going, if you want to move forward in a home lab and you're like, cool, what's the next step after, like after I've taken my company laptop and I've put Virtualbox on it. Now I want to go further and I want to build my own. First of all, buy it off from eBay, buy it off from Craigslist, do that. Take an old PC you have at home, old laptop, do that first. A good RAM, a 1 gigabyte. But it depends. Like, so I think if you're running like, you want to run something and have a bunch of separate stuff, cool. You can run like 1-2 gigabyte of RAM on something. The server that I built, so I like my progression was I had an old MacBook that I loved, but I needed to use Windows. And my buddy was like, check this out, dude, VMware Fusion. And that's kind of how I stumbled into starting to have a home lab. So I took what I had on my MacBook, and then it eventually worked its way to my desktop PC. And then my gaming computer once that crapped itself and I had to get another one, I gutted it all out and replaced what I had to replace. And it's now its own production server. And it's, I say it could be, but it's got, IPMI remote monitoring, I could remote into it, and even when the power's off, that kind of cool stuff like you see in a production environment at somebody's work. But I bought all of that stuff off from eBay. So I bought I have the case. Let me see here. I can show it on the screen right here. So I just took this. So that's my server, the big black thing right there. And then so that started out as a gaming PC, which I bought to play Star Wars Battlefront. I was thoroughly disappointed in, but that's a story for another time. But what I did was once the gaming PC part stopped working, I decided I wanted to build my own like actual server. And you can buy one off from eBay for $300 and that's cool. Or you can spend a couple $100 in parts. So, it's not like, I'd say it's relatively fiscally acceptable. But if you don't have $200 that you want to blow on this, don't do it. Like, It's not worth it. Wait, find it for free. If you really need, I'll send you a crappy old laptop that I can't get working. I don't care. Like, maybe you can get it working. But I digress. So I went on eBay. I bought a used server motherboard for like $25. Super micro motherboard that takes up to 64 gigabytes of RAM. That somebody probably retired. Like, really good stuff gets retired every few years. You know, some companies want to cycle out their equipment every 4 years or 5 years or whatever. So you can still get really good stuff that probably works better than, like, my server is probably better than a lot of the small businesses that I've consulted with. And honestly, it's probably more organized. If you can, the cable management's probably better on mine too, which is crazy. But so I did that, and then I bought a big old beefy Epic or AMD Opteron server processor. It's a 16 core processor, so it's plenty for what I'm going to do with it. And then I had 32 gigabytes of ECC RAM, which if you pay attention to nerd news, you'll know that that's been out there lately as some drama because of Linus Torvalds, who's really mad at Intel for making ECC not usable in desktop computers. ECC is error correcting. So fun other digression. Just through magic, like literal background radiation magic of the universe, bits in your RAM can flip from 1 to 0 sometimes. And that's really not a big deal for almost any of us ever. But if you're working in a production environment with high uptime and you have a lot of stuff going on and you really need your stuff to be exact, like in databases with, you know, you're crunching a lot of numbers, you're storing a lot of data. When those 1s and 0s get flipped, bad things happen. So error correcting RAM just basically has an extra parity bit at the end. So what that does is says it's basically like if you've got 8-bit RAM, there's an extra bit on the end that says the rest of these are fine or they are not like they should be. And that's all error correcting RAM is. It's really cool. It should be in everything apparently, but Intel disagrees. And a really angry man from Northern Europe that has a whole world named after him named Linus. He's really upset at Intel lately. So that's that. But yeah, so I did that. I had some old hard drives sitting around. You don't need a whole lot of space. I also have a NAS, which is network attached storage. That's cool. Yet another thing I don't think you need to pay money for. You can also build that yourself. It's just a fancy way to store things and to be able to access them. And mine also has RAID configured. So, you know, I've got RAID. I can never remember exactly. I think it's RAID 1 is where it's directly mirroring, you know, so I've got 2 4 terabyte hard drives that are exactly the same and mirroring. I think that's RAID 1. Yeah. So, and then on top of it, like I have my networking gear. And that's really quick unless you need me to stop right now. I can keep going or I can stop. Like I can say, yep, and we're going to wrap it all up. But somebody can feel free to take the mic away if that's how it's going. But for networking gear, I think that's the part where I thought that I would need something crazy. For like 8 years, though, I just used whatever came from Comcast, and then went to like, you know, at some point went to whatever you buy off the shelf at Best Buy, you know, like a Netgear or something that's not from Comcast. And then Ubiquity, which is a big brand. Then I spent money on that. And then I made my own PF-Sense box of my own firewall with my own firewall and router and yada, yada. And that's awesome. I think everyone should build a firewall. You don't really need to, but I think it's a cool, fun thing to do. Everyone should build a firewall. I currently, this stuff is all Cisco Meraki, which is their small medium business line. I only use it because they gave it to me for free. So otherwise, it's really expensive and stupid, and I don't think I'd recommend it. But it's free, and it's free for the next few years. So I'm going to use that, and then I'll go back to making a pfSense box again because I have a bunch of old Barracuda firewalls that are basically just mini computers. Like, that's all a firewall is. So it's crazy when you start playing around with your home lab, you start figuring out that, like, oh, did you know that a router and a firewall is just a computer? Like, it's cool. You're just putting different files in an operating system. You can take your laptop and turn that into a firewall. You can turn it into a switch. All you need is a bunch of ports. I think that's really cool. Those old Barracuda firewalls, they're about this big. We used to think it was fun to see what we could run on them. So we'd run video games on them. We'd run, VMware on them and load other things. We took some old firewalls and we'd make them into when I was at work, we'd take those and turn them into old retro gaming machines and then just load old ROMs from Super Nintendo and stuff on there so people could play on it. Like, cool, that's an old firewall. So most of those, all those firewalls, you could break them and do whatever you want with them. This box right here is Security Onion. I think that's another fun thing you could play with is a SIM. Sure, forget you. I'll say it however I want. It's my presentation. But it's for security monitoring. So I think that's a really cool thing to have. Bye, Christopher. A SIM is a cool thing to have. It's fun to play with. You learn not just about like security, but you learn about how your network works. And I think that's a big part of the networking thing for a home lab is you're going to learn a lot about how your network works and networks in general. Like once you start looking at like, oh, okay, I have to plug this in here and, to operate a web server, I need this LAMP stack. So I need to install this and then I need to install this. And holy cow, you need to put databases on like everything. Why does everything require a database? Oh, okay. All right. That makes sense. All right. PHP. Cool. Oh, wait a minute. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute. This thing is vulnerable. Well, how do so you just kind of like snowball into things and you don't necessarily have to, but it can be fun to be, okay, we just, we'll go back to that wiki example. Like, oh, okay, we just installed this wiki. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute. Then you read like, oh, okay, you need Apache, and Apache is a web server application. So Apache is just basically opening up ports and protocols and creates a bunch of folders where you can put stuff. And you're like, oh, wait, that's what a website is. Everything's just a bunch of files. That's all everything is. But then you're like, oh, this is Apache version 2 and is really vulnerable. Well, how did I figure that out? Because now I'm running, security monitoring on my own system. And oh, by the way, it's open source. And those people come to Gurkon and they'll shoot the breeze with you. Like the people that make the stuff, like they're cool. People that make Security Onion. But you're like, okay. And then you're like, all right, I'm going to use this out of the box tool, the Security Onion thing. But Security Onion is made up of an elk stack. You're like, what the heck is an elk stack? And then suddenly you're like, cool, now I know more about searching and logging and Kibana, which is dashboarding. Oh, okay, cool. So that's interesting. But now you can plug other stuff in. You're like, all right, so now I've got Snort and Bro and Zeek. And that's all built into Security Onion. But what the heck is Snort and Bro and Zeek? Well, Bro and Zeek are the same thing. They changed the name Bro to Zeek. Probably because the name Bro is not the most professional sounding software. But like you're starting to pull all this information and then you keep asking yourself like, why? Like, why is this happening? How is this working? And the biggest like takeaway for the home lab is you can answer those questions yourself. If I want to know, like if I go to work and I do security monitoring and I just, like I have this one pane of glass software in front of me, what did I do with that thing? Like if I just, if it looks like this and I just get alerts on my web page, and it'll show me what's going on, I can't like break that apart to see what it's doing under the hood at the office most of the time. I mean, I think you should try and see what you can get away with, but teach their own. But I would not recommend that. But when you go home, you could say, okay, like, with the security monitoring, all right, like how does this stuff actually work? And suddenly like some of the mystery is removed from some of these things, but also like more mystery. The more you understand, the more mystery you get to. So like, hey, all right, now I know the security onion. This is like, all this is doing, all that I do is like this information from logs is taken out and something sorts through and filters this stuff and presents it somewhere else. So like maybe I'm interested in the sorting part. Like I'm really, like I'm really curious about like how my security monitoring tool knows what to alert and what it doesn't alert. Okay, so you could start digging into there, like you're digging into the log alerting itself. Or maybe you're like, how do these logs get created? And suddenly you're looking at, SNMP traps and whatever, like, oh, okay, so all this traffic moves across the network and it's all getting kind of vacuumed up by our security monitoring. Well, how does that work? And how do they talk to each other? And that's another cool thing to look at, like how does this packet go from here to there? And when it does, like, what the heck is a protocol? And then suddenly you're just like, oh, wait, we're back to everything's just like a text file. And that's all it is. So I think that might be kind of where I'm going. I think we might be getting there. This is what my server does. I can show you like, it doesn't all have to be at the command line. Like I installed a Ubuntu desktop really quick. I also have in my resources, you'll see I have, you can download Windows 10 for free, the development software. They have the development versions of Windows 10. So you could always try doing that if you want to, say you work in desktop support and you want to figure out a faster, easier way to troubleshoot, or you want to figure out like, I remember when I was doing desktops and I had to deploy a lot of desktops, and that's dumb. So I figured out how to make a Windows deployment server, which is great. That's fun. I love doing that. And somebody eventually told me, you don't need to be doing this other thing because you automated it. Why don't you go do this other thing that we're going to pay you more money for? That was cool. So I learned something fun. I didn't have to do my BS garbage job anymore. And somebody paid me more money. That was great.
Is the Windows 10 dev OS, is that available to anybody or just partners?
Yep. I think it asks for like a who's your employer and what's your email address, but that's it. It's the same as like the evals for Windows Server.
Okay.
And
Links.
don't tell anybody I said this, but you can lie to them.
Yeah, that too. Yeah. Are we still recording? Shucks. That was James King. He could be found here. So like, what do people want to know about home labs? Like anybody that's, if you haven't set one up, and is there something that's stopping you? I think that's a big thing for me. Like, what's a hurdle that you would find? Is it just like, I think it's overwhelming? And hopefully I took some of the overwhelming away, but sometimes I get a little excited because I think it's cool, which may make it seem a little more overwhelming. I hope not. Don't be afraid to just click whatever. Like, privacy doesn't matter. No one cares about it. You can just click through anything. But yeah, like you have your own Ubuntu desktop now. also have Windows subsystem for Linux. So check this out, that Kali Linux that everybody's like, oh, you're going to work in security. Do you want to work in security? You should figure out what Kali Linux is. And then in a couple weeks, somebody's going to say like, you shouldn't talk about Kali Linux so much because you're going to get made fun of because whatever, you know. But you could do that directly through Windows now. Like you just have to turn on the Windows subsystem for Linux. Ubuntu on my Windows desktop. I think for now I'm gonna stop sharing. Are there like that way I can see everybody?